Okay.
Welcome to all of the listeners out there.
All right.
We're doing our Star Trek, the original series. The
Mm-hmm.
second part, we're going to kind of cover what's going on with that and
Correct.
kind of get into that a little bit.
All right.
And we'll pick up where we left off.
Correct. Yeah, because we wasn't able to continue the whole conversation of all the episodes from the original series because it was decided to keep it do a part two this Wednesday here.
We may even get to a part three. We don't know yet.
Who knows?
See how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, we left off at Errand of Mercy.
Mm-hmm.
The following episode is the alternative factor. Oh, and if Dave Rose shows up, I know he wants to
All right.
be involved.
I know.
So if you see him,
Probably later
bring
on
him
I
in.
should probably get him involved in the call if he's available there.
Right.
Mm.
But the alternative factor, excuse me, involves them being near a planet that all sorts of wink outs and whatever are occurring. It's draining the dilithium crystals and some real problems.
Mm-hmm.
And they go to the surface and they see this madman running around, and they say they try to figure out what's going on. And he keeps telling them, well, it's this other guy in the alternative universe or whatever. And they investigate and they find out that there is a porthole or portal or whatever they call them to the alternate universe, which is basically us backwards or
Yeah,
whatever.
the parallel universe where the good guys are evil and the evil guys are good.
Yeah, well, they go in there and they find his double, and he's actually the good guy. The guy on their side is not. And the guy on their side just can't cope with the idea of there's somebody like him out there. He's trying to get into there and destroy him, which will basically destroy pretty much everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so they try to figure out a way to close the portal, and they have to leave the other guy in. And basically, that's pretty much that story in a nutshell. Next, they followed it up with The City on the Edge of Forever, which in my mind is, and a lot of other people for that matter, is possibly the best Star Trek original series episode.
Mm-hmm.
It ranks number one in a lot of places. It was written by Harlan Ellison, but it was also kind of they tweaked it here and there. Uh, Basically, Dr. McCoy injects himself with some kind of something that pretty much drives him mad accidentally,
Mm-hmm.
and they go to the and he gets away and he beams down to the planet, and so some of the crew follows him down, and while they're down there they come on this strange portal which I guess time people, I forget what they call them, tells him that they can go back and they can
Transporter or
yeah,
teleporter?
well
Yeah.
it's kind of a portal into time, and
Like a
they
time machine.
yeah, and the guardians of time, I think they were,
Ah.
tell them they can go back and they can kind of explore things and see what's going on and all that, and they were like, no, we don't want to go. Well, suddenly the madman McCoy comes running by and he jumps into that portal, and the Enterprise disappears.
Wow.
And basically, it said that McCoy did something back in
Wow.
time, which changed time. So basically, gets into some of the time paradoxes and things of that nature, and how you possibly can change history and all. Kirk and Spock have to go back and find out what he did and stop him from doing it. Is essentially the story, and they succeed. But it's a story you really have to see what happens and what's involved, because it definitely gets into time paradoxes. It gets into their personalities. It gets into a lot of stuff. It's a very good episode, and it's well worth watching. I would definitely recommend it to anybody to watch it.
All right.
And then the last episode in the first season is one called Operation Annihilate. Basically, they're checking on a colony on a planet, and they're not getting any signals from the planet, and they don't know what's going on. So they beam down to see what's going on, and they see people, but the people are running at them, trying to run them off or whatever, tell them, go away, get out of here. And it's what's going on here. And they find out that there's, well, one celled animals or amoebas or whatever that are all over this place. And they basically take over the humans down there and cause some problems with that. And they have to figure out a way to get that done so that these amoebas or whatever are gone. And so that episode is I'd say that's a good episode too. It's at least good, borderline very good. It's worth watching. Well, pretty much
Yes.
all of them except for a couple of them are. And then we start season 2.
Hmm.
First one, and that one's Amok Time, or Amok Time, or however you want to pronounce it. Basically, going crazy time.
Yeah.
And this is the one that involves Spock. The way they breed, procreate, whatever,
Yeah.
they have a certain time, and they get into a situation where their blood runs wild or whatever, and Spock kind of semi goes crazy. He says, "Well, there's somebody back home that I'm supposed to hook up with."
Ah.
Yeah, and basically they go back there to do this, and the person he's supposed to hook up with is in the meantime fell for someone else. And even though she's promised to Spock, she challenges it and says that
I love this person instead of you, basically.
essentially, but it's one of those things that when she does that, Spock has to fight whoever it is basically to the death, because that's the Vulcan way, which is kind of
Ah.
weird when you think about them.
Fight for your love, I will. That's like that kind of scenario.
Yeah. And what ends up happening is she is supposed to choose the challenger to Spock, and she picks Kirk. And
Wow.
Spock has to fight Kirk.
Oh boy. And
And
they're
basically, that's what the
friends and they're comrades and friends.
right.
That's the thing there.
But Spock is in this blood crazed thing where he's not fully aware of what's going on.
Oh man.
And so he ends up fighting Kirk.
Hmm.
And
I can remember that. Yes.
McCoy, you need to see this into. This is
Wow.
among the excellent episodes.
Wow.
And this one, he ends up, McCoy's taking care of in between when they're fighting. I guess you'd call it the round rest or whatever. Um, McCoy ends up injecting Kirk with something that simulates death but doesn't kill him.
Wow.
And
Kind of like a coma, needless to say.
yeah, and essentially they fight some more, and then of course Kirk collapses, and Spock thinks he's killed him.
Well done.
And after he's calmed down a lot, and he goes and asks the girl. He says, "Well, obviously you like this other guy you're with. Why did you pick Kirk?" And basically her answer was, "Well, if Kirk won, he'd go away. I'd still have what's his name, and if you won, you're going to go away. I still have what's his name."
Hmm.
So, and
Wow.
he says, "Oh, brilliant logic," something like that.
Wow.
And he goes back on board thinking he's killed
Kirk.
Kirk,
Kirk.
and McCoy talks to him a little bit. He says, "I'm really upset because I killed my friend, the captain, or whatever."
The
And
guilt.
Kirk comes walking out, and he's like, "Jim," like real emotional, and good to see you're okay, or something like that. He falls
Yeah.
back into his logic thing.
Oh
But
yeah.
it's definitely worth watching. It's a good episode.
Wow.
I'll rate it excellent. It's
Absolutely.
it's one of those that you'll remember once you
Yeah.
see it.
I think I remember seeing something like that ages ago as a kid, but I'm getting the picture what you're speaking of there, and it does come back to mind as you were mentioning that particular episode. Definitely. And
Okay, then.
go ahead.
No, you had a point. I wanted to see what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just talking about the episode you were talking about. I remember seeing them in their battle uniforms at that time. More, of course, Space Age version, as you know.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
But that was, like I said, that was definitely a good one to watch. So
Hmm.
I would recommend it highly to anyone that's.
And because when you think about it, also puts together the question of how much we sacrifice for the ones we love.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Another theory of that would, of course, have to be Anakin Skywalker and what he did to save his wife Padme. And look how much damage he done to the Republic and to himself along the way.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is an episode that ranks among the top
Yeah.
10.
Whoever
Easy.
and whoever coined the phrase, "the things that we do for love," was spot on. Most
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay, they followed that up with Who Mourns for Adonis,
Hmm.
which essentially was well, like they always do, they're out of planet, and they find that there's this being on the planet who turns out to be one of the old Greek gods Adonis,
Hmm.
and he's welcoming them because they can come down and live there, and they can make sacrifices to him and worship him and all that stuff, and basically he's trying to convince them that they need to stay there. They don't want to stay there, and he's not letting them leave. And essentially, by the time they get to the end of this one, they pretty much convinced him they're not interested in worshiping him, and he kind of says, "Okay, well, I guess you got to go, and I guess I got to, you know, let myself go to the stars or whatever."
Be on my way, merry way.
Yeah, and essentially, that one it's a good episode. It's not a it doesn't rank among top ones, but it's a good episode. We actually won't get into fair episodes until a little later on,
Yeah, that's true.
but that was a good episode. The next one's actually pretty good too. Uh, Called the Changeling.
Yes.
Uh, Basically, they're above yet another planet, and there were supposed to be, I think they said, 4 billion people on the planet. Not a soul. No one's there, and they're kind of
Deserted.
wondering what happened. And they get basically suddenly attacked by this thing in space, and they tag back, and it just simply absorbs their beings like there's nothing.
Wow.
And he hails them, and this thing answers and says, that he wants to come on board and check them out. And basically, they beam this thing aboard. It turns out to be a space probe from early Earth that had been hit by a meteor, and its programming changed.
Wow.
And essentially, this thing didn't destroy the Enterprise people because Kirk had the same name as its creator. And so the
Ah.
thing mistook Kirk for it being his creator,
Ah.
and it kind of spared him, kind of followed what,
Spared them all their lives, basically because of that name.
yeah, at that point.
Ah.
And then it basically was kind of thinking things over, I guess, for lack of a better term,
Oh.
reevaluating.
So, was this other Kirk? Was he a relative of James T. Kirk or somebody else with a similar last name?
I think he just had the same last name. I don't think
Oh.
they ever said that he was related to him or anything.
That's yeah. There are cases like that, because where
Yeah.
one can have a same name as yourself there. In fact, that's one of the big reasons why I had to add the doctor to my YouTube name here and Skype name and such because there was other Earl Browns out there running about, and I didn't want to
Yep.
be people to get confused. And let's also not forget the actor W. Earl Brown, who starred in Deadwood many years back.
Yeah. Well,
So
that's
I know
one
I
of the
can
nice
understand
things
that.
about
Yeah.
my name. I'm not likely to find anybody with my name because it's a made up name
I
anyway.
know. Yeah, that's true there. Yes.
You know,
Yeah,
it's kind of like there's nobody with that name. Well, yeah, there's a good reason
that's
for that.
true. Yep,
But
that's true.
the
Yeah, you could never
next one
tell,
is
folks.
Mirror, Mirror, and I'm going to have to look at that for a second.
Hmm. Another episode, Mirror Mirror, you
This thing
said?
will ever change.
Okay.
Yeah, the next episode is Mirror, Mirror,
Ah.
and I'm kind of looking through it real quick to see if
Ah.
this, because I'm not that familiar with this one.
Hmm. Go ahead, take your time, dude. Shout out to everybody who's
Yeah, it's
watching today, or this early evening, I should say. Shout out
well,
to Minutes.
actually, this is kind of weird. I know I've seen this episode, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I don't recognize it yet.
Mm.
It's
Must have
kind of
been
weird.
must have been one you've actually forgotten a few years back.
Yeah,
All right.
but
Hmm.
basically, it's, oh, okay, I remember now.
Ah.
A landing party being back on the ship, but the alternate of them beamed on the ship and not them. And it caused some problems, obviously, on the ship. And you know how it works; it always seems to. And basically, they had to figure out how to get their old comrades back and get the other people, off the ship, because essentially it was the alternate universe thing again.
Yes.
And then they followed this up with the apple, which is basically, well, of course, yet another planet.
Yep. How many
Uh,
planets are out there by chance? I mean, like they find this one planet, they find that planet there. It's like, gosh, how many out there beyond these other galaxies? I was wondering. It's like, damn, there must be more than we have bargained for. I realize it's all fiction, but still, you can't help but wonder if we actually have other planets that are way out there that we are not knowing about. I mean, there was a lot of talk about Planet X a few times on a couple
right,
radio shows there.
right. It's kind of what we're getting into here.
Yeah, nice.
And then they followed that up with an episode called The Apple, which, well, that's what I just said, wasn't it?
Yep, correct.
Anyway, they beamed down and they found these natives basically down there. And essentially, they ended up training them how to make weapons and fight and all that stuff because I guess they were having trouble with another tribe there. And essentially, the theory was that they had introduced the apple down there and changed these idyllic people to,
Hmm.
people just like us, essentially.
Ah,
Then they followed that up with,
actually, we did. Actually, years later on, an Apple would come and change things. Apple computers.
right, right,
Yep. So kind of coincidentally that you mentioned that one there.
yeah. Next one was the Doomsday Machine, which they encounter this thing in space, for lack of a better term,
Yes.
that's just going around eating planets.
Wow.
I mean, it's just basically it's just a huge gaping hole that's devouring planets, and they've got to figure out a way to defeat it. And of course, that's just that story
Wow. How in
and
the
what's
world
going on there.
how big is this thing that eats up a planet? Is it like an entity or something like a black hole?
Basically, it was a traveling black hole,
Wow.
or it wasn't a black hole. It looked just like a gaping. I don't. I don't know how to describe it. Kind of like a gaping cornucopia.
Mm,
You know
wow.
the machines you see with all the fruits and stuff in them.
Yes.
But essentially that's what it was, and they just went around
Wow.
devouring planets.
Damn.
Yeah, kind of scary when you think about it.
Very planet, because God knows, I'm praying that we don't have any that's actually running out there. And please, I don't want no more people coming to say the end is near. black hole cornucopia is going to be coming to eat us up pretty soon. Let's not have one of those idiots running around. It's bad enough that we had to deal with all these threats of Y2K back in 99 and all these 2012 conspiracies that were being predicted a year previously. That's like, oh gosh. Actually, 2012. Did I say 2012?
I don't remember exactly when that was.
The movie. I mean, the movie. I'm talking about all the conspiracies of the doomsday occurring in that particular year.
Yeah, I think that was the original time it was supposed to happen.
Yeah, and of course you can see we're still here. We're still living, breathing, driving cars, and doing everything, working, living. And that's
Right,
yep.
right.
And so I don't know who the hell comes up with these dumb ideas. I swear, man. I swear. Someone
Hard to
on
say.
probably the drugs that they're taking.
Yeah, you would think so.
Yeah.
Next episode, one called Cat's Paw,
Yes.
which basically was yet another planet, and they encounter beings that have extreme power, and they do it with well, they call it a transmuter, but it's kind of like a one-like thing, and it basically could do whatever these two people wanted it to do or whatever. And so they have to kind of deal with that. And this is a good episode. Uh, and basically, they have to try to figure out a way to defeat these people, which essentially is they steal this wand, and Kirk breaks it,
Mm.
and it transports them back to the beings that they really were.
Oh. Wow. Like regular people or a prehistoric or
Well, little bird-like things.
bird
I
like.
mean, it didn't. Yeah, it was weird. You'd have to say it.
Oh wow. That's something there. Right. And
And then
go ahead. My bad.
and then after that, they followed it up with our friend Mud comes back. This episode's called I Mud.
My name is Mud. Remember that? Remember
Yeah,
that I told you last w- last week about that particular joke that the WE cartoons used to have?
yeah.
No, yeah.
But essentially, he's managed to be the ruler of a planet full of, well, again, android women. He seems to have this thing for women.
Oh wow.
But essentially, they have to just figure out a way to kind of defeat him. And I'd consider this, I'd say it's a good episode. Maybe
Yeah.
even pretty good. But it's entertaining because Mud's a fun guy. There's
Uh,
just something about him
you can't help but
that
like.
makes it. Yeah,
Yeah. There's always that one little comical character that everybody seems to enjoy once in a while.
yeah. But that's the second episode that Mud shows up in.
I see. Yes.
Next one's Metamorphosis, and basically Spock. And I don't remember if anybody else was with him or not. Uh, but Spock and a couple other people end up on a planet where there's this guy there that basically he's there kind of amazingly because he was a space traveler that he got stranded on this planet, and he essentially is able to live because he has what he calls the companion, which is a swirling light thing or whatever. And he says that's the reason he could survive is because this thing took care of him and did everything for him. And then Spock and whoever else was with him decided,
Mm.
well, we got to get back to the ship because this lady that's with us is in need of medical attention because she's not doing well.
I
And
see.
essentially, as they go along, the companion's trying to keep them there because the companion is lonely without this guy there
Wow.
and wants the guy there, which is kind of weird because, like I said, nothing but swirling lights.
Yeah.
And basically, it ends up because the lady's dying that they're
Mhm.
carrying. It ends up taking over the lady and becoming the lady essentially.
Falls in love with
And
him. I remember seeing. Yes, I remember that scene. As a matter of fact, and I remember this the crew member in there that you speak of. Um, he basically decides to stick with her, and Kurt decides to relieve him from his duties because she'll
yeah,
die of loneliness.
yeah, that's
I
essentially what
remember
happened.
that. Yes, definitely.
But that's another pretty good episode, I think.
Yeah.
And the next one is Journey to Babel, which I think I remember what this one's about. Let me just,
Yes.
yeah, this is the one that they were trying to get a gathering of some of the planets that weren't in the Federation
Um,
together
to join in.
to kind of join up. And this is
Yeah.
one that they had to have an ambassador, a special guy,
Yes.
to get together with these people. And it happens to be Spock's father.
Wow. Big Daddy Spock.
Yeah, and essentially, from what you get, is that Spock and his father haven't been on good terms
Mm.
because his father didn't want him going to Starfleet. He wanted him to do what he was doing, which was basically being an ambassador. But
To the planet
essentially,
Vulcan.
yeah, and essentially, it just talks about their kind of strained feelings and how they finally kind of got it together.
Hmm.
And
So
basically,
it's like a rebonding between father and son.
yes,
All right. I see now. I know. Anybody out there who's had a bad relationships with their parents can probably relate to that particular episode. Definitely know about that. There was a couple of people I remember who told me about that episode. In fact, my best friend one time, up shout out to him, Dennis, you know, Romeo, Michigan, big Star Trekkie there. There were times when he didn't get along with his stepdad, you know, and now as he's older, he's now making amends for it by contacting him lots of times. Those two have seen the amends there, made amends
right.
with one another there.
And then they followed this up with Friday's Child,
Yes.
which essentially they're on a planet that the Klingons want to be involved with,
Wow.
and so essentially they go down there and they have to deal with the Klingons, of course.
Yeah.
And there's two tribes there. The Klingons take up with one of them, and Kirk and his party take up with the other one.
Yes.
And essentially, Friday's Child references the fact that the leader of the tribe that the Kirk people are involved, the Enterprise people are involved with, uh, is pregnant with the child of the chief, and he's supposed to be the next ruler after the chief.
And you
And
said the
essentially,
chief of the Vulcans, right?
oh no, this is a planet where they're,
Oh,
I,
okay. No, my
I don't
bad
remember.
there. Because I can imagine, because what I understand, Vulcans have some extremely rough sex,
Yeah, it's
according to the Next Generation series there.
yeah, and Deep Space Nine kind of gets into that too.
Oh yeah. I would say I talk about rough sex, but that would be an understatement.
Yeah, yeah, and they followed that up with the Deadly Years, which Kirk and a couple of the landing party on this other place pick up some kind of virus that ages them rapidly.
Oh man.
And of course, McCoy has to figure out what's causing it and fix it. And if I remember right, he was one of the people affected too, so he had to do
Wow.
it,
Quickly.
even though he was aging just as fast as anyone else there.
Yeah.
So he
You know what?
essentially had to do that.
You know what? This kind of reminds me. You remember those back in the '80s? There's this condition whose name escapes me, as where it's able to turn young infant kids, around the ages of 4 or 5, into their skin starts crinkly. They start looking like baby aliens. There, I'm like, what? Do you remember that condition that is called?
Jiminy. No, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, because that came to mind when you were talking about this one particular episode. Because a lot of times we have heard seen on talk shows and news reports of this particular condition that makes the kid's skin so turn into they basically have skin and the looks of an older person, but even though they're still about the ages about 4 or 5 or 6 or 3 or 7 there. In fact, I remember there was this one sci-fi, low-budget sci-fi movie there where they actually employed some of these kids to play aliens, believe it or not, because that's what they looked like in a lot of ways. Aliens.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I think I remembered that.
Yeah. And the name of it escapes my mind right now, believe it or not. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when you mentioned that episode, that's the first scene that came to my mind. It's kind of like when you think about it, that episode is like a predecessor to what we would find out in the 1980s about this particular condition.
Right. Right.
So did Dr. McCoy find a cure for this condition in this episode?
Well, yeah, because
Good.
they come back.
Ah, sweet. Gosh.
And they followed this up with an episode entitled "The Obsession," which essentially was they're exploring and they find this creature that's causing all kinds of problems. And Kirk seems real obsessed with this creature. And it turns out that he had encountered this creature once before on a previous ship he was on before he was a commander, and it had wreaked havoc in that ship. And basically, very few people survived it. And so
Wow.
Spock got the impression that he's just simply wanting to kill this creature because
Yes.
it caused problems. But Kirk had other things in mind. He was wanting to destroy the creature, but mainly because it was killing people and doing really bad things. And it was headed for another place where it was going back kind of like Salmon to spawn. And so there would be not just the one, but lots of them. And so basically he I guess had the obsession that he was going to follow him back and deal with this creature. And so basically that's kind of what entailed in this episode was him following it back and deciding that he was going to kill it, and they ended up killing the creature.
Wow.
This is a pretty good episode too. They followed that up with Wolf in the Fold, which was kind of interesting too because the landing party's on a shore leave, and Scotty went to a nightclub, and when he left the nightclub,
Mm.
a girl died,
Wow.
and essentially it looked like Scotty did it, but he
Wow.
didn't remember anything about what went on, what was going
Uh,
on, anything of that
one
nature.
of those scenarios. We heard about those many times in the news where two people go to a club or two people go to a hotel for the night, and one of them ends up dead, and the other person ends up being have the blame put on them. We've seen this in headlines many, many times. One of them, of course, of course, Sid Vicious, the
Yeah,
Sex Pistols bass player. There's still people that claim that he possibly killed his girlfriend Angie Spungen in the Chelsea Hotel in New York City. Some say he did, some say he didn't. It's still
kind of
unknown
up in the air.
because apparently he doesn't. Sid Vicious didn't remember his own damn self, but yet he got put on
Yeah,
trial and eventually never came to be because apparently he died from a heroin overdose prior to that trial actually taking place.
yeah. Well, in this one, they go to try Scotty, and they kind of start discovering things like what's going on has been happening in other places and such,
Ah,
most notably in London, England in the 1800s. And
I
it
think we
turns
know
out,
Jack the
yeah,
Ripper.
exactly. And
Aha!
basically, the Jack the Ripper entity had taken over Scott
Oh
and
boy,
had him
kill
do
somebody!
this.
Wow!
and then the entity kind of left and went other place. It
Went to
apparently
this
they
person, went to that person.
yeah,
Hmm.
and essentially their whole thing was trying to figure out a way to destroy this entity.
Wow.
But it's a good episode.
You know what this
They follow that.
You know,
Go ahead.
there was in 1979, Malcolm McDowell starred in a movie that was kind of like similar to
Oh, I remember
some
that.
the movie Time After Time. He was played H.G.
Yeah,
Wells, who travels to the future in pursuit of Jack the Ripper. And
yeah, that was it. I saw that. That was a good movie.
yeah, and that's kind of what that came to my mind as we were discussing this particular episode. It's like, wow, that would have been an amazing thing, to search for Jack the Ripper, who somehow used H.G. Wells' time machine to get it to travel to the future to commit his crimes and get away with it.
Right, and that was essentially the point of that movie, as I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was good.
yeah.
And then they followed this up with probably one of their most famous episodes, The Trouble with Tribbles.
Oh my goodness, I was that came to my mind as well. All those tribbles. And everywhere. You know what? I gotta mention this. There was an episode of, I guess, Deep Space Nine where the the captain there, played by Avery Brooks,
Right.
who played it in this series called A Man Called Hawk. Prior to that, I mean, if you can remember that show there.
Yeah.
Avery Brooks, whose name he played, kind of escapes me. Um, he traveled. Him and a couple others traveled back in time, just as to the Enterprise. It's just when these tribbles were like all running rapid all over the place, and it kind of like got mixed up in all the hysteria because of these here creatures there.
Yeah.
And it was,
But
and it was even at the end of the end of the show, they somehow computerized the cap Avery Brooks's captain to to meet up with Captain Cook and have him sign something there. I guess it was get an autograph, and there you go. And then at the last words, there was a little bit of narration saying, "I was finally able to meet the one and only Captain James T. Kirk." It's kind of like a little homage to Shatner's character there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this particular episode, our buddy Mud makes his way back.
Ah,
He's the
third
guy.
time.
He's the guy selling the dribbles.
Oh my God! And how fast do these things reproduce? It's like
Oh, it was amazing.
that's like how man.
But that's a real good episode to
That's
watch. It's
probably
fun.
that probably still probably one of the favorite episodes. Probably all of the series combined when you think about it.
Yeah, it's what you'd call a fun episode because it
Yeah,
is fun,
yeah, it is fun. It's
and
like yeah,
it's a good episode.
yeah, and these triples are not they're not life threatening. They're not causing any mischief. They're not like termites or roaches or anything. They're just there, reproducing like gangbusters.
Yeah, yeah, but, that's a good one to watch.
Yeah.
They followed that up with the Gamesters of Triskelion,
Mhm.
which essentially was a planet where you had to they had fights going on, and they were
Mhm.
using people from other planets and such to do this. And essentially, it was kind of like the old style Rome thing, where the arena and people bet on who was going to win and all
Ah,
of that good stuff. So they had to kind of fight in that, and
kind of like
that's
it's kind of like similar to a dog fighting ring, but it's like a more like instead of dogs, it's like whole bunch of people from various planets.
yeah, that's essentially the premise in this whole episode.
And mostly these
And
are aliens, right? It's so again, instead of dog fighting, it's alien fighting ring there.
right, except a lot of these aliens, some of them look remarkably human, but
Ah.
they're
Of course,
they're different. But
that was the thing back then. You had to, whatever alien you had that was portrayed usually was human-like because after all, you had to go through a lot of special effects, a lot of construction of the costumes to make whatever being you could think of there. Whereas
right,
nowadays it's CGI and computer animation. Could just bing, bam, boom, be done a quick drop of a hat.
And the next episode was a piece of the action
Mm-hmm.
where they traveled to a planet where they found a book about the old style Chicago ganglands, and
Yes.
that's how these people lived. They basically lived like the whole
The
planet was like,
1930s.
yeah, it's basically,
Wow. No. You know what? We should probably take some of these idiot guys and gals today who dress in all these funky hairstyles, funky clothing, all these colory, the ones, especially the young teenage boys with the pink hair, and ship them off to that planet and show them this is how men are supposed to dress. How about that?
yeah,
Because a lot of these kids out there with the blue hair, the orange hair, the green hair, I am sorry. Come on, give us a break. Please, enough already. I mean, you've seen all these pictures of the guys with their beards sticking out, their things in their earlobes, with these little man buns.
yeah.
All right, ship them off to that particular planet for God's sakes.
They followed that up with, excuse me, the immunity syndrome, which was an amoeba-like creature crawling through space,
Yes.
basically destroying things. Sound kind of familiar, but
Yep.
it's
Mm-hmm.
just kind of a different take on it.
Wow.
And this was another pretty decent episode.
Yes.
Um, but basically, they had to discover a way to do away with this amoeba-like creature because it was fixing to reproduce, and so they had to figure out a way to do that.
Wow. That's right.
And the next one was a private little war, which is another one of those of a planet with natives and different tribes having to try to fight each other. And of course, again, the Klingons show up. They take one side. Kirk's crew takes the other side. And essentially, it was just them trying to basically, I guess, fight. And it's not a bad episode. It's a
Mm-hmm.
good one.
Yes. All right, there. Kind of makes sense there. Because remember, when you're in space, you gotta. I'm a loss of words. I cannot speak right now. Go ahead. I was gonna say completely stupid and off track here, but I'll let you continue there. Stop myself before I say something totally idiotic.
Okay, the next episode was Return to Tomorrow.
Mm.
And they go to this planet that is apparently lifeless. There's nobody on it.
Wow.
And they beam down and they find these three glowing orbs down in a cave, which was the essence of the last three survivors.
Ah, there's those
And
souls, and basically.
essentially, that's kind of what they're trying to tell us.
Yeah.
And essentially, they end up beaming them on the ship. Two of the orbs were a man and his wife, who were, I guess, for lack of a better word, good guys. And the third one was from the other side. And they basically want to build bodies that
Mm.
they can live in so they can kind of do that again.
Yes.
And to do it, they obviously have to kind of temporarily uh, inhabit the bodies on
Yeah.
the ship. And
For the time being.
yeah, and the evil guy ends up in Spock.
Oh boy.
The guy ends up in Kirk,
Mm.
and the woman ends up in one of the females on the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, they're trying to build these creatures. And while they're doing it, the bad guy says, "Hey, you know what? I like this," and he wants to keep the body that he's got.
Which is
And
Spock.
right, and the other two don't want to do that. They don't want to be any part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, they end up at the end figuring out that we've got to we can't do this. We've got to just go off into whatever.
Yes.
And so that's what ends up happening. And
Yeah.
they essentially, That's another pretty good
They
episode, I
get they
think.
get they get rid of the entity out of Spock eventually at the end there.
Oh yeah,
Yes, of course. And for a minute, that almost reminded me of Invasion of the Body Snatchers for a moment there.
yeah, yeah. It's pretty close to that. That was a
Yeah, the only difference, the bodies don't come out of little pods. Yeah. All right.
And the next episode was oh, it's taking me Patterns of Force,
Mm-hmm.
which essentially they go to a planet and discover that one of a former starship that they were tracing, their captain had pretty much taken over the planet
Mm.
and turned into kind of like a semi-Hitler type guy, and they
Fascist.
had to figure out they had to figure out a way to solve that.
How to keep them in check, I guess.
Yeah, and that's a pretty decent episode. Doesn't rank among their best, but it was a pretty good episode.
Yeah. Kind of like a forerunner to the dictators we would come across years later, like Muammar Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, and the Ayatollah of Iran. And of course, everybody who lived in the Middle East, who later moved to America, can relate to that because, remember, that was one of the big reasons why they left those countries. Who can live under a dictatorship when you think about it?
Yeah, yeah. Next one was By Any Other Name, which
Yeah.
I'm trying to run this one through my mind because I can't remember exactly what.
Go ahead, take your time.
Man, boy, this one's just drawing a blank.
Wow.
Well, I guess we'll just skip that one.
All
Huh,
right.
weird. The next one was the Omega Glory, and they go on a planet, and these people are essentially trying to fight for something, but their language is garbled.
Um,
And the Omega Glory, they talk about that
blah,
and
blah,
how,
blah, 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 something like that they speak of.
yeah, and it's kind of weird because they start to say it, and then suddenly Kirk realizes that's the preamble to the Constitution of the United States.
Mm.
We the people, whatever, because they were
Yes.
saying it real garbled. And then he figured it out and he said it to them, and they were like, "Whoa, how'd you know our sacred words?"
Oh.
And because we've at one time our people lived by these sacred words,
Ah.
and
Interesting.
it's pretty good.
You know, can I add this? Wouldn't it be cool if other worlds out there were to adopt the same ideas and that the Constitution of the United States have? Would
Yeah,
adopt those ideas onto their home world?
absolutely.
Yeah, because one of the reasons why I'm kind of been reluctant to go to visit other countries. I always wanted to visit Australia. I wanted to check out Germany, but you got to remember those are different systems that they are running over those countries there. One of them, of course, being socialism. Others a dictatorship, which is mostly in the Middle East there.
Right.
But still, I know some of these Middle East countries are like getting adapting to more modern times, especially the Arab women over there. They're now getting the grants to have careers, whether it's makeup, television, let alone drive automobiles. It's still slowly getting there, getting to where it's like a democracy, but there's still that ounce of dictatorship that looms over those particular countries. You know,
Yeah, it's still the old guard there.
Yes, exactly. It's modern. It's modern, but at the same time, still old school.
Yeah. Well, the next episode was one called The Ultimate Computer,
Mm.
which essentially this guy built this computer that's going to do lots of stuff for people, not such.
Well,
And it started doing some strange things, for lack of a
Wow.
better word.
HAL
And it,
9000 in their version.
well, kind of, and it's kind of weird because Kirk asked him, "Hey, what's going on with this computer? Why is it doing that?" And the guy that was with him was the guy that created that computer,
Yes.
and he said he implanted some of his thoughts and processes in the computer, kind of like a, there's a word for it and I can't think of what it is,
Transmitting
but
thoughts into this computer, basically.
basically he put his essence in the computer,
Ah.
and the computer, unfortunately, the guy had some character faults, and the
Oh.
computer was carrying them out, and it
Wow.
was doing things like it went off to destroy a freighter just because,
Wow.
and essentially just started doing stuff, and the guy was kind of like, I didn't want it to do this, I wasn't wanting it to do this, but it was picking up his,
Essence, his thought patterns,
yeah,
his personalities, his good and dark sides.
right.
Wow. That's something there. Yeah. Because
And the
when.
next,
No, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
My bad.
No, that's fine.
Well, basically, when I thought of when you first described that episode, first thing came to my mind was HAL 9000 from, of course, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and what happened with him towards the end of that movie. There, of
Yeah,
course, we would find out what happened in the sequel, 2010. Of course, we would find out what the whole deal was with that, what happened with him, and isn't it safe to say that these Alexa machines that you or Google, these little voice activators where like, hey Google, what's the definition of so and so, or Alexa, what time is it in Australia? When you do that, you realize that you're talking to two different versions of HAL 9000 when you think about it.
yeah. There's a form of artificial intelligence in those things.
Yeah, I know. You know what? There was
It's
a lot of
weird.
I often could. My nephew has one of those little cameras which you're able to film outside of your door. It would be cool if by chance you could probably have one a red light, one of those little covers there that you put the little things that you get from the quarter machines where you get these little toys of bubble gum there. Those little
Right.
things that come in those round like plastic containers. Take the round part of that and glue it on to the little red light there, and there you go. You have your little HAL 9000 right there in front of your doorstep there.
Yeah.
And it's actually, it's a little thing there. You can actually talk through it. There's a little voice where you can talk through your phone. If you had a voice changer up there, you could probably sound like HAL 9000 when you come to think about it.
Yeah.
Some that came to my mind there. I had to get that in. Right.
Next one was bread and circuses.
Ah.
Yet another planet.
Yep.
This time it's kind of like ancient Rome.
Damn.
It's
Damn. Let's say this saying that the Star Trek universe has all these more planets than Star Wars would be an understatement. Cause you're,
yeah.
oh gosh, and we don't really get the names of these particular planets, do we?
Well, I think they do tell the name each time,
Yeah.
but of course it's something they made up. Yeah, it's probably not a real planet.
Yeah, no, because of course, obviously, it's just like when you compare all the amount of planets that were featured in the original series, are there to the ones in the Star Wars series, whether it's Exegol, Alderaan, Coruscant, and this other planet, this place or that, a world there. It's like,
Right.
gosh,
Right. Then the last episode of season 2
yes,
was Assignment Earth. Basically, the Enterprise travels back to 1968 to see, just
mm.
to kind of do a little observing of history and all.
Around the
And they essentially run across a guy with his black cat that seems to be a little more than you would think.
yeah, too good to be
And
true.
and it turns out that he's basically alien
Yep.
that's on Earth, disguised as an Earthling because he's kind of watching what they're doing down there,
Yeah.
and Kirk and Spock figure it out, and they try to hold him. And he basically convinces them that he's got to get back there because he's got to prevent World War III because he knows something that's fixing to happen and he's got to make it not happen.
Ah, I see there.
And he has to convince Kirk and Spock that he's on the level. And I guess they basically said, well, I guess you are, go. And he basically takes care of what he's got to take care of and essentially saves us from World War III.
Wow.
That's a decent one, although it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of weird, but it's a good episode. It I haven't seen it as much as some of the others because for some reason I seem to miss it through the rotation. But that's a good one to watch. And then we can go to season 3.
Yep.
But before we do that,
Yes.
because it's actually our time's almost up.
Yeah, I know. So we got about 5 or 6 minutes left of this program here.
I was going to point out I see a couple lists of what some people say are the top 10 episodes and all.
Yes.
And on 3 of the 4 lists, the number 1 is City on the Edge of Forever. So again, I'll state that if you want to see an episode that will actually make you go, whoa, this is good,
Yeah.
that's the one to start with, I would think. And there's several others that are pretty good. One of the lists has Space Seed, which is the Khan one, as being number 2. Mirror Mirror is number 3.
Yeah.
The Doomsday Machine is number 4. Amok Time is number 5. Devil in the Dark is number 6. Trouble with Tribbles is number 7.
Mm-hmm.
This Side of Paradise is 8. The Enterprise Incident, which we'll get to, is number 9 because that's actually in the 3rd season. And then Journey to Babel is number 10. Almost all the other lists pretty much does that except for a couple of them that do. Well, one of them has Where No Man Has Gone Before on their list, which is a good one. Balance of Terror, which is actually a good one. These are all pretty good episodes. The Naked Time and The Enemy Within. Essentially, each one of these lists, a lot of the episodes are from 10 of them are from season 1. And 5 of them are from season 2. And only 1 is from season 3. So that'll tell you kind of the way to watch these shows.
Wow.
As you go along. Season 3 is kind of a drop off, but it's not as big. It's not a jump the shark thing like some of the others are shows that you've seen. It's just kind of a fall off, sort of, in quality, but it's still watchable stuff. There's only 1 or 2 episodes in there that I remember as just being fair episodes. Most of them are at least good.
Yep.
Maybe a couple of them are very good, but essentially they're almost all just good or barely good, for lack of a better word. You know, in other words, they're still enjoyable, but they're just not the same as the first 2 seasons.
Yeah.
But they're still fun to watch.
Yeah.
But again, it's kind of funny because I would say offhand that Star Trek, the original series,
Yes.
was pretty much, of all the Star Treks, well, I guess because I grew up with it,
Yeah.
is my favorite. Although Next Generation is darn close.
Yeah.
And I also like Deep Space Nine a lot.
And Voyager as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Deep Space Nine, the thing that was unique about it basically had a start. This is why we're doing what we're doing. This is why we're here, or whatever.
Yes.
It progressed through a story all through the episode. I mean, it was a story going on all through the episodes. And then at the end, there was an actual conclusion that everything reached its climax.
Yeah.
So it basically had what you want in a good story, the beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yes.
Uh, so essentially, it ran its course and it ran it well. And if I remember right, Voyager almost did the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
with
think they did the same.
the basis of that was this lost Enterprise starship, trying to get back home.
Right. But I think at the last episode, they actually did get home, if I remember
That's
right.
good. Yeah.
To be honest, I haven't seen it in a long time.
Oh, I haven't seen. I wasn't that much. Like I said, I wasn't that much into Star Trek as a kid. You know, I only watched about few three episodes, some of the originals, some of the Next Generation there, a couple times, and and there were a couple of times I watched a little bit of the with that one episode, the Deep Space Nine, where, as I mentioned, where the captain from that particular ship travels back to the original Enterprise when the time that triples was runs running amok there, and
Right.
I remember there was one where I think watched a little bit of Voyager, but mostly it was because of Jerry Ryan and her character Seven of Nine.
Which actually they didn't pick her up till partway through the series, but I don't remember exactly when.
And Seven of Nine, I guess, is now being featured on the Picard series, if I understand. Yeah, she is, because I remember saw a couple of clips of that on
Yeah, which
YouTube.
is kind of weird because that's two different Star Treks.
I
But
know, but
you know,
it's like a crossover when you think about it. But then again, you the original cast and the next generation cast crossing over into some of these Star Trek movies that would come out in the '90s was even
yes,
more interesting. I mean, finally we get to have William Shatner working with Patrick Stewart. It's like, wow,
yeah,
interesting. Very meeting of two minds there. And when you
absolutely,
think about it, also kind of like leads up to where the next generation series first starts when you think about it with the things going on on those particular movies.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, again, I'd like to encourage our listeners to leave us some comments so we can know how we're doing, what's
Yeah,
going on, and if anybody wants to contribute, let us know that because if you can contribute to the content of the show, uh,
absolutely.
that
We welcome
that
all
would be.
opinions, comments, and everything.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping Dave Rose would show up, but
I know. You know, I was so taken aback by by you talking about the episodes and everything that we were discussing that I forgot to contact him. Believe it or not, I was so
well,
taken by the all what you were saying there.
well, that's okay. I think he knew we were here,
Well, with
and he possibly has something else going on.
yeah, it's true there. I know I tried to contact him. I think yesterday. I remember that sadly for the discussion about Elvis, but sadly he wasn't available. I think it was either yesterday or the day before, probably Monday. I think is. I don't recall.
Yeah. Well, we're going to obviously get into a third one.
Yeah, definitely. And Dave Rose, if you're listening, dude, we'd like to invite you on for our third installment of the original Star Trek stuff there.
Yes, absolutely. And
Absolutely.
then
Yeah.
tomorrow night we're going to start an hour early. We're going to start at 5
Yep,
Central.
that's right. For Real Spuck TV, shout out to Minnesota Vikings fan, Minnesota Silver Row. Um, I'll be on their program as well. And of course, you know who we're going to talk about there. I won't mention his name without wanting to spit, you know.
Yeah, but we'll cover basically, I guess, what you'd call besides Elvis, probably the big four or five of the 50s,
Oh, yeah.
and we'll go over them a little bit.
The day the
Uh,
music died and the scene up until the Beatles came along with Beatlemania and the British invasion.
yeah, we'll either do that or we'll make the early 60s a separate episode.
Yeah, I'm thinking possibly doing that possibly tomorrow night. Definitely.
Yeah, but we'll go ahead and cover Buddy Holly,
Buddy
Roy
Holly.
Orbison,
Yeah.
the Everly Brothers.
Hmm.
I have them in my head.
Yeah, it's good.
Uh,
Tomorrow night, folks.
Chuck Berry.
Yeah, music
Essentially, the bigger ones of the 50s,
Yeah,
other than Elvis, because we did him Tuesday.
yes, we did.
And then Friday night at back to 6, our regular time,
Yep.
We're going to talk about Sheena, Queen of the Jungle,
Yeah,
the
from
Tanya
19.
Roberts film.
Yeah, based on the comic book and the short-lived TV series. We're going to examine that movie, and of course the Sheena character, all in all.
Right. We'll kind of go over that a little bit. We might talk a little bit about the series because actually, from what I understand, the series wasn't bad.
Yeah, Sheena Lee. Shout out to Gina Lee Nolan for her betrayal of Sheena herself. Damn, she was hot. Holy moly.
Yeah, I may have to find one of those pictures and put
Oh
up, but
yeah, ultimately, definitely. I'm going to probably find some thumbnails for tomorrow night and the next night as well. Come to think of it.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
But that's pretty much going to cover season two,
Hmm.
and we'll start with season three on our next one.
Yes.
And like I said, I hope we can at least get Dave Rose to join us.
Or any other
With
guests.
him. And
I,
anybody else that wants
yeah,
to do it
I asked that
that knows
Minnesota.
something about.
I asked that Vikings fan if he wanted to come on, join in the conversation, but he's streaming right now. So doing some sort of a little broadcast right now as we speak there.
Yeah,
Yep.
but basically, we would have just wanted anybody that can contribute to the discussion at hand, if they want to give us a call.
All right there, definitely. Okay, that's going to do it for tonight. This is Arknolia the Doctor, episode 3 of our look at the original Star Trek series, part 2. Once again, it will get into season 3 of the original next Wednesday night. That's, of course, as with time we mentioned, 7 p.m. Eastern Time.
Yeah, and actually, it'd be nice if we had some people here during the live stream a little bit.
I know.
Uh,
All right. Definitely, I'll talk to Minnesota tomorrow night to see if he is interested in joining in, or and a couple others.
okay, well, that
Okay.
sounds good, and we'll hopefully see people tomorrow night at 5 o'clock Central.
All right then. All right. Okay. You can't for Arknolia, Stroke Bean, and myself. This is Arknolia and the Doctor. TV Memories, episode 3. We'll see you tomorrow night. All right.
Okay,
6
bye.
p.m. 6 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern time. I meant to say. All right. You
Right,
guys have a good one.
bye.
Bye bye.